You may have noticed we're doing something a little bit different today. We've got not one, not two, but three of the big contenders in the compact SUV class. And we're going to help you choose between them.
But the twist in the story is that they actually aren't quite as similar as they first appear. You see, this super blue Hyundai Kona is the fully electric version. This Renault Captur, that is the plug-in hybrid. And that Vauxhall Mokka over there, that's got a good old salt-of-the-earth petrol engine.
And you probably already know that as of 2030, you won't be able to buy a new petrol or diesel car anymore. But what about up until then? Should you get a petrol? Should you get a plug-in hybrid? Or should you go and buy an electric? Well, hopefully in this video, we're going to help make that decision a little bit easier for you. But I said to Rich, I am refusing to do any more until everyone subscribes to the Carbuyer YouTube channel, clicks on the bell icon and then clicks like on this video. So do it. Thanks.
First things first, prices. The electric Hyundai Kona we have here has a starting price at the time of filming of £32,550 when you go for the bigger battery, which we would recommend. The plug-in hybrid model of the Captur, meanwhile, is $39,995, about £1,500 less than the Hyundai. You can get yourself an entry-level petrol Mokka for just £20,240, even if the particular one we have here actually costs £27,445, because it has the more powerful 128 brake horsepower engine and an 8-speed automatic gearbox.
What's more relevant than the car's price tags is how much they cost per month. On PCP finance, with a deposit of £5,000, the Kona is the most expensive at £348 a month, which is maybe what you'd expect since electric cars tend to cost more than others. The three are remarkably similar on a monthly basis, however. The plug-in hybrid Captur is only £7 a month less at £341 a month, and the petrol Mokka is the same. You can get the cost of the Mokka down to around £250 a month by going for the most basic version, but the majority of buyers will at least go for one of the higher trim levels, if not the more powerful petrol engine as well. It all shows how big differences in list price can look a lot smaller when you see the monthly finance payments. Range anxiety remains one of the main reasons why people are put off with electric cars. I mean, this version of the Kona, for example, with its 64 kilowatt-hour battery, will officially give you a range of 300 miles, which we've actually found is around 270 maximum, as long as you're driving very carefully and making the most out of the regenerative braking, which is where the power goes back into the battery as you're slowing down. It's also worth thinking about how often you actually do journeys of 250 miles or more, because if it's only a couple of times a year, then you'll probably find the savings that you make on fuel will outweigh the inconvenience of having to stop and charge all the time. Plus, if you know that you're going to drive an electric car mostly around town, you might save more money by going for an electric car with a smaller battery. If you're doing a long journey with the Kona, you need to stop on the motorway to charge up. A 100 kilowatt fast charger will get this Kona up to 80% in around 47 minutes. There is no denying that you can fill up petrol or diesel a lot quicker. But if you're doing a long journey and you've already planned to stop and get something to eat and pop to the loo, then actually you're not going to hang around that much longer than you had already planned. Now, other more expensive electric cars will charge faster than the Kona, but you do have to pay more for the faster charging experience.
Now, talking of charging brings us nicely onto this Captur plug-in hybrid. It's actually got a much smaller battery than the Kona over there, but it will still do 30 miles on electric running alone, but the cold does affect the range, so 20 miles is a worst case scenario. If you're charging at home and you've got a wall box, then 3 hours is how long it takes to charge the battery, 4 hours if you're using a standard domestic socket. The fastest you can charge the Kona at home, 10 hours. So if you're running around using the Captur just for short journeys, and be that a commute or a school run, then you could realistically not put any petrol in this car at all. But when you need to go a little bit further afield, you've got the engine to fall back on.
So how do the costs of running these cars compare? We based our calculations for the Kona on the average price of electricity in the UK, which gives us a price of £9 for every full charge at home. To plug into a public InstaVolt fast charger, not the cheapest, but certainly one of the easiest and most reliable, the price increases to £22.40. But remember, it's unlikely you'd ever do a full charge at a public charger.
A full charge of the Capta's battery at home will cost £1.40 at the same average UK price for electricity. PHEV buyers aren't likely to charge at motorway service stations and the like. How much petrol you'll also need to buy is very dependent on how you use your car. But take the official fuel economy figures for the plug-in hybrids, in this case 188 mpg with a large bag of salt. Longer journeys and trips with a flat battery will dramatically increase your fuel bills and are likely to see economy nearer to 40 mpg.
Now, the price difference between home charging and public charging of an electric car remains pretty big. But, I mean, unless you've struck oil in your back garden, you've got a makeshift refinery, when you're filling up the mocker with petrol, it's going to cost roughly the same wherever you go. Let's use £1.23 per litre as an average. Now, to give the mocker 300 miles range, so it matches the Kona, you're going to need to fill up 29 litres of fuel, which will cost you £36. That's also making sure that you stick to the official economy figures of 47 miles per gallon. So, if you want to fully fill up this tank, this 44 litre tank, it's going to cost you 54 quid.
So let's simplify things even further. If you're doing 10,000 miles a year and you own a Kona and you're charging at home and you get 270 miles on a charge, you're looking at around £333 a year in electricity. If you miraculously somehow manage 47 miles a gallon in the mocker, you're looking at £1,177 a year in petrol. So quite clearly, there's more to this than just initial purchase price. For context, that's £28 a month in electricity compared to £98 a month in petrol.
Now, our relationship status with the Capture remains as it's complicated. Now, that is because the running costs on this vary wildly. This all comes down to how often you charge the battery. If you leave for all of your journeys with a nice fully charged battery, then this car will sit very nicely between the mocker and the Kona. But if you're always going to do long journeys, or if you're just going to drive around with a completely flat battery, then actually this is going to cost more to run than the full petrol model. That's because the weight of the hybrid powertrain is doing nothing but adding to the fuel economy. One thing we can say for certain is that a plug-in hybrid has a big advantage compared to a petrol model when it comes to benefit in kind liability. Company car tax is based on official CO2 emissions and they're far lower for plug-in models. So a PHEV makes a lot more sense than a pure petrol model as a company car. BIK is likely to be around 11% for a plug-in versus 30% or more for a petrol model. Running costs aside, there are other perks to having an electric car, and that is how quiet they are. I mean, in this Kona, all you can hear are the tyres on the road and the wind going over the top. Also, electric cars don't have gearboxes, so the fact that you don't have to change gear makes driving them very relaxing, especially if you're in and around town or if you are stuck in traffic. Refinement isn't the only advantage either. I know people made jokes about milk floats back when electric cars were first released, but actually electric cars, and most of them now, are much quicker than conventionally powered cars of the same type. And the way that they deliver their power makes them feel really nippy. And the fact that you can mount the battery quite low down gives the cars a nice low centre of gravity, which means that they handle corners really well, even given the fact that you've got the extra weight of the electric powertrain.
So plug-in hybrid drivers can benefit from the same lower running costs as electric car drivers, and if you plug this thing in regularly and use it as intended, it'll feel like an electric car to drive. You see, this Captur starts every journey in its electric mode, which gives it a certain sophistication over the standard Captur models. And if you leave it that way and keep the batteries topped up, it'll match an electric car for refinement as well. Most of the time, however, you'll leave this car in its standard hybrid setting, which means it's constantly switching between petrol and electric, which means it just doesn't ever feel as serene or smooth as an electric car. This is heavier than a standard Captur as well, so it doesn't feel as quick as an electric car either.
A car with nothing but a trusty petrol engine underneath the bonnet is the one that we are all most familiar with at the moment. And in some instances, it might still make the most sense to you at the moment. It is still the cheapest way into car ownership, and it is the most straightforward when it comes to habits and lifestyle. We all know where we can get petrol. We all know that we can get it instantly rather than having to wait for that guy who is using the charger that you want to charge for your electric car. Oh, and now you can charge it. Now you've got to hang around while your car is charging. And you also don't have to worry about buying and installing a wall box or making sure that you've got decent parking at home so that you can do a bit of home charging. We also appreciate that people like us still enjoy driving a car with an engine. For some people, getting from A to B quietly and efficiently is a priority, but also for some people, driving for the sake of driving is a pleasure in itself, and I think that is also worth considering.
Whether you go for an electric, plug-in hybrid or petrol car will depend largely on your circumstances and how you plan to use your car. But running an electric car or a plug-in hybrid is made much easier if you've got somewhere to charge it at home. Okay, it might seem daunting at first to go for an electric car, but as we've seen throughout this video, the initial purchase price is only part of the equation. It's much cheaper than the other two to run. Now, road tax, you don't pay any road tax as a private buyer, and company car drivers get really favourable rates as well. Running an electric car, especially if you drive mostly in town, is really relaxing, and that's only going to boost your green credentials. One thing you do need to consider, however, is if your annual mileage is very high, can you make those changes to fit your lifestyle around an electric car?
Now that is where the plug-in hybrid comes in. Where it might not be as cheap to run as an electric car, you can do short trips around town on battery power alone. Or if you're doing a long journey in it, you don't have to plan to stop and charge your car, because that is where the petrol engine kicks in. You get the best of both worlds. But there is one major downside, and that is when the battery goes flat, fuel economy is nothing to write home about. And also the weight of the hybrid powertrain means that PHEVs just generally aren't that great to drive anyway. Now, I know that they are more affordable to run as a company car, but also they're a nice little stepping stone between a petrol power and an electric car.
And that brings us finally to the pure petrol car, which still represents the most affordable route to car ownership, even if it's ultimately not the cheapest of the three types of car to run. We appreciate that for many people, a car that needs plugging in may simply not be a practical option. A petrol car doesn't require any changes to how you use your car or plan your journeys, and it's much more convenient to refill a car with petrol than it is to charge an electric model.
So there you have it. If you're in the market for a new car, it's well worth considering exactly how you're going to use it before choosing between fully electric, PHEV and a petrol. We know that electrified cars aren't for everyone at the moment, but whether you like it or not, that's where the world is headed. And if you can make it work for your current circumstances, there are potentially some big benefits.
If you enjoyed this video, why not watch our review of the Volkswagen ID3 or our hybrid and electric cars playlist.